Hello everyone, and welcome back to another How to Train Your Dragon video. So we were going across Reddit and we stumbled upon this article from Reddit. Don't worry, we're going to leave the link for you guys down below because it's a very entertaining read. So at first glance, this Redditor's article comes across as kind of just another white knight social justice nitpicking agenda. But upon closer inspection of reading the article, this Redditor does have a point with a lot of the things that she pointed out. We really encourage you guys to go over and read the article for yourselves, but we're going to be reading for you some of the excerpts and why we agree with certain things that she says and why we disagree with certain things that she says. The Redditor started off by saying that she was really excited to see the poster. She was excited to know that How to Train Your Dragon 3 was coming out, which we're all excited for because we love dragons. But she said she was very disquieted when she saw the female Night Fury, more accurately, the Light Fury, which is supposed to be a subspecies of the Night Fury that is still able to breed with the Night Fury. We've done videos on this already, and they will be included in the card so you guys can catch up with those. She was expressing her concern for animators always toting female characters in a more smooth and helpless, softer versions of their male counterparts. This seems like nitpicking at first, especially when we consider us as humans. Females usually are biologically the softer, more helpless, if you want to say it that way, or weaker version of the species based on their muscle mass and bone density. But for creatures like dragons, this most likely isn't the case if we're comparing them to their closest cousins being birds and reptiles. Redditor also mentions that she does have a degree in animal and veterinary science and an animation degree. She said that if anyone were to ask her as an animator to design a female Night Fury, she would have designed this. In part of her article, she says, "Because from a superficial perspective, I would not expect that there would be an obvious difference between males and females. Night Furies obviously take a lot of design influence from axolotls, who you can only sex by examining their cloacas. I can never say that word. Many species of lizards must also have their sexual organs examined for reliable sexing, because color and size variation in many species are not a reliable way to tell the difference between males and females." Then she jokingly puts a caption to this picture saying, "Someone paint this girl's nails pink, otherwise how will we know?" She also argues against, if dragons are being compared to birds, that the females are usually the duller version of the species, because if they're the ones protecting the nest, if you will, they have to be less obvious than the males. Females are biologically larger than males in the bird species, usually because they not only have to house the eggs, but they also have to sit on them. They are duller in color so that they won't be an easy target in their environment, especially if they're trying to protect their young. She gives another example of what the female would look like in the Night Fury species on the right, being a little duller in color, less obvious in the male, and a little bit bigger. While I agree with her here that in natural circumstances, the female version of the Night Fury would make sense for it to be larger in that circumstance and have duller color, it has already been proven, or at least it has already been stated, that this Light Fury is a subspecies of the Night Fury and not actually a Night Fury. She also logically argues that the Light Fury would be an easier target out in the open, and so it does not make sense from an evolutionary standpoint why there would even be a lot of Light Furies, since they would be easy targets and easily hunted down. He also mentioned this and actually expounded on this very fact in another video. She also brings into her argument to support what she has said by bringing up the eclectic parrots, which people may use against her argument. He goes on to saying that these species of parrots live in the rainforest, so while they are different colors, there is still an element of camouflage to this coloring. The female blends into the green treetops, and the male looks a lot like delicious fruit. And you can even see as she is blending into her background, because most likely they would live in an area where green, reds, and oranges pop more than browns. Again, she continues, "A white Night Fury doesn't make any sense. Judging by when we first meet Toothless, and my BS knowledge of fictional dragon behavior, it's fair to assume that Night Furies hunt at night. Toothless is so dark that he is almost impossible to see in the night sky. And just to add fuel to her fire, for those of you who didn't realize, on the logo of DreamWorks for the first How to Train Your Dragon movie, how many of you noticed the Night Fury in the background? Go back and watch How to Train Your Dragon when the DreamWorks logo comes up with a little boy on the moon, and look very carefully into the background. If you missed that there was a Night Fury flying by, that further proves the point. She continues, Toothless is so dark that he is almost impossible to see in the night sky. This is where the tension comes from when Hiccup first encounters the Night Fury. He just sees blue flame and not the dragon itself, because it is so difficult to make him out against the dark sky. The female Night Fury would be shot down so quick, she would stick out terribly at night. She wouldn't catch Jack. All the sheep in the field would be like, oh damn, I can see Phyllis 2 miles away, we all better shuffle into the barn. There's a reason albino animals are so rare in the wild. They just stick out too much and often get eaten. Really adore the passion that this writer had put into her article. It really is entertaining to read, and again, go to the link in the description so you guys can read for yourselves. It's very entertaining. Again, we also brought this up in one of our previous How to Train Your Dragon videos, and that was the issue with the Light Fury from an evolutionary standpoint. Especially if the subspecies had evolved from the Night Fury, why would it evolve with a handicap? Night Furies were all supposedly hunted down to near extinction, and if they are dark and so hard to spot, then the Light Furies would be even more danger than the Night Furies, especially if someone seeing them would recognize them as an albino or rare version of the Night Fury. They would be sought out as much as a white whale would be. Redditor goes on to saying, and I quote, "But India, some protests again, like an absolute idiot who is about to be slapped out of their ignorance, Night Furies are so fast that nothing could possibly catch them. They don't have to worry about camouflaging to avoid predators." Goes on to explaining that the fastest bird in the world, the peregrine falcon, is not completely white, but has a white underside and a gray dorsal. She says, "The peregrine falcon is actually probably a decent comparison to the fictional Night Fury, actually. Small in size, bird of prey, horrifically fast, but they have this sort of coloring for similar reasons. The dark coloring isn't just camouflaging during flight, it also helps them blend into the environment when they're nesting. Similarly, the light underside helps them to hide from prey when they're airborne." She has a point here. She goes on to mention that the Light Fury has not only fewer antennae than the Night Fury, but also smaller ones. This is quoted from part of the article. "The few antennae that the Light Fury has are much shorter. We've seen Toothless use these, and they seem to be similar to a cat's whiskers in their sensory role. So why on earth would she have less? And they would be much shorter. She needs those. Without them, she may have difficulty flying, orienting herself in the air, or feeling the winds she will have to combat. The designers are trying to feminize her by making her seem sleeker and rounder, which functionally makes no sense. Why not do the opposite? Give her really long antennae. Have them constantly moving in the wind." He continues, "The other thing that I immediately noticed was how smooth she looks. They took away almost all her scales, and again, she doesn't need those for protection. This is so odd to me because it feels like they removed her scales in the same way that pinup artists never draw body hair. Body hair is seen as unsightly on women, so artists remove it, leaving their subjects smooth and shining. Do the DreamWorks designers think the scales are unsightly? Have they waxed this dragon and replaced her scales with body glitter? They also made her nose a lot shorter." She goes on to editing how the Light Fury should look, which I think is in fact a better design from an evolutionary standpoint. Just for fun, here are some other examples from other artists. Now, we really enjoyed thoroughly reading this Redditor's article, and we think she has a lot of points. I personally also understand her concerns. So we've taken our time to put together this video in a way that will be as neutral as possible. I assure you we don't have any political agenda, and we're just voicing our opinions based on the observations. So we're going to start off with why we disagree with the Redditor and why we agree. Starting off with the disagreement isn't so much of an opposing viewpoint to the Redditor, but more so an understanding on why the animators supposedly chose to design a Light Fury the way that they did. Okay, so the first thing is, since younger audiences are going to be watching the movie, the animators wanted it to be painfully obvious which character was which, just as Pokemon have drastically different colors and designs to tell them apart. In favor of the Redditor, I don't think that animators nowadays give children enough credit on having enough intelligence to know how to differentiate things. If you give a child 5 red identical dinosaurs, early enough the child will be able to tell all of them apart, even though you wouldn't be able to at first glance. Number 2, the animators probably chose the Light Fury to starkly contrast the Night Fury, so that the female would not steal Toothless's shine, as funny as that sounds. Toothless is one of a kind, and they want him to remain that way because that's what makes him special, and that's what makes him stand out. If they made a black female version, then there would essentially be two of him, which makes him less special, and not the last of his kind, which seems to be the agenda they're pushing. Notice in movies where there's a main character, most of the time, none of the side characters or supporting roles look anything like him or her. Number 3, the other reason they probably chose a Light Fury to be white is because they wanted her to be motherly. A less threatening and softer version of Toothless would make people see her as the more innocent and alluring dragon, something that you would want to chase and capture and protect. It also makes her appear more rare. Number 4, this is a point that we will expound on later. And it's the theory that the Light Fury probably lives in an area where she does not have to be out too much in the open, thus her very light color. As for her antenna, she probably does not need them to be very long from where she comes. We'll expound on that later as well. And lastly, and we think most importantly, is the fact that these dragons can fly. The dragons in How to Train Your Dragon are very colorful, and for good reason. When they're flying around in the sky and there's a lot of aerial action going on, it's very hard to differentiate the dragons from one another, and it's hard to tell which one is which when all that action is going on if they're very similar in color. Stark black Night Fury and a very white Light Fury are easy to differentiate from one another when seen in the distance flying very quickly. This is not just for kids' sakes, but for audiences of every age. On a sports field, different individuals of a team will have very large numbers on their front and back, so that the audience can tell who is who. Now, those are all arguments in favor of the animators and why they chose for the Light Fury to have those designed. Now we will list our theories in support of the Redditor. From an evolutionary standpoint, if the Light Fury is supposed to be a more evolved version of the Night Fury, this would make no sense for her to be white and have a shorter snout and shorter antenna. To be fair, it is possible that she has smoother features and a shorter snout, claws, and appendages due to her being a very young Light Fury, or simply because she's female. Although a lot of female birds appear larger than their male counterparts, birds like certain species of waterfowl and wrens have a larger male. This includes roosters. So, roosters are definitely larger than the females, and if they had the same color as the females, they would definitely stand out due to their taller size. So it does make sense for Toothless to be larger in this case. In certain environments, the males do have to be larger to protect the females and their young. It is also possible that the Light Fury may have smaller antennae because she either doesn't need them as much as Toothless does, or they aren't fully developed, or she was just the runt of the litter. Now, if Light Furies resided within an Arctic environment, then her design would make total sense. However, our Redditor has a point that it seems as though the design flaws for the Light Fury have handicapped her. Now, the only thing that can serve to make sense for the Light Fury's design is what we mentioned earlier. She is white and smoother because of where she lives. What if the Light Fury lives or evolved to adapt to the hidden world? From what we can see in the How to Train Your Dragon 3 trailer, the hidden world exists in a pocket below the earth where there isn't much light. The naked mole rat is an example of other animals that live underground where there is little to no sunlight, having very pale skin. Cave-dwelling creatures are usually very pale in color, or white, because skin pigmentation would be a waste of their body system's energy. Why make melanin when you don't need it, when the sun doesn't even hit or reach where you live? It is possible that this is the reason why the Light Fury also has blue eyes. In recent studies on Arctic reindeer by the researchers who consequently had their findings published in the October 30 issue of the Proceedings of the Royal Society, they have found that in the summer, Arctic reindeer eyes are a golden hue, while in winter they turn deep blue. The place where these specific reindeer live has a Norwegian winter where they are in darkness for 2 months due to the sun keeping below the horizon. Due to the darkness, the eyes of the reindeer become almost constantly dilated, which can be a bad thing due to the glaucoma studies that prove that dilation increases fluid pressure within the eye. A lot of vertebrates like reindeer have what is called a tapetum lucidum. As quoted from an article by Jason Battelle, the tapetum lucidum reflects light back toward the retina like a mirror, in effect, giving the eye a second chance to use whatever light is available, be it stars, moon, or a distant street lamp. More powerful light sources like a flashlight or spotlight mean more powerful reflections, which is why a raccoon in your garbage appears to have the eyes of a radioactive hellhound. Now, back to these Arctic reindeer. I'm sorry, this is totally nightmare fuel for creepypasta. Although their eyes have this ability, when their eyes turn blue, they reflect 50% less light than the golden eyes of summer. This is actually said to be an evolutionary adaptation to more effectively recycle light for an animal that has to survive several months of the year in total darkness. Although this should not be taken as gospel, more believably, it could be that the Light Fury has more recessive eye color, since where she comes from does not require her to actually see well. But the Redditor does have a point. If that were the case, shouldn't her antenna be longer? From what we can see in the hidden world, everything is almost bioluminescent. You can imagine, if you watch the trailer again, for a place tucked away under the earth, it would not have much light, if any at all. Some animals and organisms have to create a bioluminescent environment so they can communicate, hunt for their food, and even create a distraction from predators. All of the above theories are likely reasons as to why the Light Fury has that color. If she's a dragon that lives above ground and she's white just for the hell of it, then it makes no sense why she and members of her species would exist and be flourishing if they are, while Night Furies that are more clandestine and harder to see at times, they supposedly come out, have been hunted down near to extinction. It just does not add up, and we completely understand the reason for the Redditor's frustration. If the female Light Fury was designed white just for the sake of it being a pretty female, then it's a lazy design. As the Redditor points out, Stormfly does not have rounded spikes and eyelashes, yet it has been made apparent that she's a girl. While we will reiterate that the Light Fury is a subspecies of the Night Fury, if it is supposed to be a more advanced version of the Night Fury, it should be harder to spot, since the supposed reason Night Furies are almost extinct is because they were hunted down. So we tried to look at things from the animator's point of view and from this Redditor's point of view, who also states that she has a degree in animation. We think that it all boils down to its marketability. The Light Fury, being a light color, stands out a lot more. Most female counterparts of cartoons usually do. They are usually lighter in color and smoother in contour. But what we do agree with the animators on, whether this was intentional or not, is Light Fury being white so that she can be easily spotted during the fast-paced action of the movie while the dragons are far off flying in the air. Anyways, don't forget to check out the article, and thanks for watching. This has been Altiori. You ask, we answer.